Well, at least when looking at the title, I personally feel a little itch because speaking about the biggest change in 140 years, it's basically, well, a pretty big thing, I'd say. So, but for us at Breuninger, it in fact is or will probably be the biggest efficiency gain that we've ever had in our history. So let me ask you guys, do any of you have any kind of forecast in their company? So please, if you have, use the chat and just type a little yes, or if you don't, type a little no, because I'm going to talk a bit about forecasting now. I thought so. So we at Breuninger also do have forecasts, but we have a big bunch of different forecasts, I'd say. And well, what we're doing now is we're in a transition from Excel-driven forecasts, from manual forecasts, expert forecasts, from also a bit of data-driven forecasts towards a unified demand forecast. What we do need a demand forecast for, well, I'll tell you in a couple of slides. First, let me tell you what Breuninger is, in fact. So Breuninger, it's in the German-speaking region of Europe, it's basically the biggest chain of premium and luxury department stores. Currently, we have 11 stores in Germany. We have a big online shop, which is pretty well performing. And if you studied the German news, then you'll realize that, well, just last week we signed the contract in order to buy an Munich national store in Luxembourg. And well, if you listened carefully to our CEO, then that's just the first step in our expansion. And well, we're looking back to 140 years history. So this means that we have quite a lot of processes which are, I'd say, organically grown, meaning that in the past somebody had an idea and then translated this idea at some point in time into an Excel sheet, or if we're lucky, into a software tool. And so basically we have a pretty process landscape where we do some processes in dedicated tools, some other processes are followed up or added up in sheets, then the results are entered into other tools or fed back into the initial tool and so forth. So basically our planning and inventory at Breuninger, so basically the purchasing processes and the processes by which we steer our goods during the seasons are pretty fragmented, I'd say. So well, if you look at this little sun over there, which is the sunny sky over Breuninger, there is unfortunately a little cloud in the status quo. And this little cloud, it's basically our planning and inventory processes, where we have our assortment planning, our merchandise financial planning, our merchandise steering, which basically, yeah, it's a pretty rainy and thundery cloud with a lot of manual work and a lot of expert knowledge entering the system, basically. And we decided to, well, start working on that cloud and taking out a lot of small different data science use cases and start basically one after the other handling all these manual processes by data-driven approaches. So one example would be our house and size distribution, where basically the procurement managers go to a producer of articles, like let's say it's black t-shirts, and they tell the producer, please give me I need for next season 5,000 black t-shirts. Then the producer provides these t-shirts in a given set of sizes. And now we have all these sizes in our distribution center, and from there we need to distribute these sizes among our stores and the online storefront. So basically, already there we have a little optimization problem, basically. But I'm not going to talk too much about the house and size distribution, but rather on the hopefully soon to be historic purchasing process. In our historic purchasing, we have some pre-order phase where we have a couple of smart people doing the assortment planning. Basically, they plan on an assortment level what they expect to sell in which house. And then we have the merchandise financial planning, which is basically the opposite. So the assortment planning is a bottom-up planning, and the merchandise financial planning is a top-down planning. Where in merchandise financial planning, we have some big financial goals, and then these goals are basically broken down into assortments. And then in the end, we have some assortment planning, some broken down assortments from the top-down planning, and we need to try to find a fit. When we know these that we want to order at the producers, we go to the producers, we make the main order, and then there are a couple of different things that can happen. For example, you can offer additional discounts if we order a little more, or he or she tells us that, well, they offer only a given set of sizes and so forth. And there we need basically our little expert here, which is using his expert knowledge in order to make the best order possible. And that's a pretty slippery slope, I'd say. And there we want to help him or her with a couple of algorithms. After the order, we are in the season, and there are also a couple of things that can happen, like that we enter stock outs because this guy here ordered too little, or we have to reorder, or we can sometimes reorder, sometimes we can't. Sometimes our goods need to be relocated, and then in post-season we also have some markdown phase. And we want to help this little guy by telling them, well, there is a demand for our articles, and this demand will be that high. So, for example, our demand forecast could say, well, next season we are expecting to sell 5,000 black T-shirts from this and that brand. Go to that brand and order them there. And then our expert still can make a decision whether he wants to follow that forecast or whether he or she expects that there is a deviation. Well, so much about the process background, I'd say. Now I will try to dig a bit into the solution. And the solution is basically a complex system of different algorithmic tools which need to work together in order to improve the overall performance of our system. So we not only do we want to predict demand, but also we want to predict demand that we have the right goods at the right moment for the right customer. Well, this sounds pretty much like marketing, but that's exactly what we're trying to do, and we're in the middle of the process of doing that. So basically, we have, of course, also some external data. That's right. Oops. What's happening now? Yeah. So we have some. No. Okay. So I will not draw a little picture. What I'm saying was that well, basically the message of the picture was that we are in a pretty complex landscape where we use a forecast, which is basically getting feedback from the assortment planning, from the assortment steering, from the merchandise financial planning, and from a couple of different other things. And basically, the forecast is dynamically adapting to not only our article master data, our competitor data, and so forth, but that it's also interacting with markdown algorithm, because you can imagine price has a big impact on demand. And so if you have a demand forecast and that's followed by a markdown algorithm, then you can expect that the demand curve, well, you'll have two demand curves, basically. One demand curve with standard prices, and then one steeper demand curve for the reduced prices. And so basically we need all these feedback loops between the forecast and the subsequent systems in order to optimize the actual numbers. So also our marketing events, for example, can enter this forecast and so forth. This has quite a lot of business benefits, of course. Like our procurement managers need to do much less manual work and can work much more strategically. The planning hopefully will increase in quality. This depends, of course, on the quality of the forecast, but I'm pretty positive about this. We'll have, for example, also less relocations, because the forecast will tell us, well, we need 500 black t-shirts in Stuttgart and 425 in Leipzig, and there and there and there. So basically we need to relocate less. And in total, the article distribution will be more data driven, because we know, or we have a forecast of the demand for a single article in a single store in a single week, basically. By this, we also reduce lost sales, we improve our costs, and the most important thing is, of course, the higher customer satisfaction. This just on a management level. Now, yeah, well, that's just what I just said. Now let's dig a little deeper, and well, yeah, just I'd like to take you through our proof of concept phase, basically, and tell you what we do there, as far as I'm allowed to tell, of course, and where we are headed to. So from a data perspective, we have, of course, our article master data. We have pictures of our articles, which is a good thing of our online store, because simple brick and mortar stores do not take pictures of everything. We, with our omni-channel strategy, we have pictures also and textual descriptions of everything. We have some lifecycle information on our articles. Still, that's something we are still working on, because, well, depending on how we define an article life cycle, it can have a huge impact on what the forecast will predict about the demand for that article. We have holiday information, opening hours of our houses, weather data, seasonality. Well, you can read the slide basically. Just to mention the customer data, of course, it's in accordance with our GDPR, and it's rather kind of information like in the past, 25 black T-shirts have been shipped to that broader area, and it's not tackling a single customer basically, but rather a customer cluster, so that we are definitely in accordance with GDPR. Cross-price elasticities, because well, in fashion, for example, if you sell a set of articles like a bikini bottom and a bikini top, for example, then oftentimes they are complementary goods, and if you change the price of one of the two, then it will have an impact on the other one. Or sometimes also you can easily substitute your goods basically. From the algorithmic requirements, well, I had shown you initially the timeline. So basically, the order process happens 18 months before the article ends up on our selling floor. So that's why the algorithm must be able to deal with a multiplicity of data, not only with different data formats, but also with lots of missing values, basically, or with high degrees of freedom. Because initially in the planning phase, the purchase department knows they want to buy black T-shirts, but then they go to a producer, then they learn, well, the T-shirt has an imprint, it's from this and that brand, it's of this and that material. And the more information it gets, of course, the more detailed the prediction of the forecast has to be. And then, as we are currently evaluating the proof of concept, we of course have the big Corona problem with our data, because, well, as I think a little bit everywhere, there have been lockdowns over the last many months, and so we have a big hole or a big breach in our data for our brick and mortar stores, basically. That's why we decided that we take 3 years of training data prior to Corona, but also the test data will be from prior to Corona, because now it's first about proving that the forecast will be able to predict demand, and it's not so much about predicting demand for a very special period, hopefully for the rest of the existence of Breuninger. So the data is provided by our data platform, and we measure the quality of the POC by some predicted KPIs, by also the diversity of algorithms used, and by a couple of other let me skip that. So just a last point about the complexity of the problem. So the forecast should work for this entire period of time. So from 18 months before the start of the season till the end of the season, basically, and even after the end of the season. And therefore we need to measure the quality of the forecast at multiple points in time, in the planning phase, in pre-season phase, and in season as well. And well, of course, I also have a couple of takeaways for you. So as soon as you break some company traditions, it's very important to accompany it by change management, because we have a 140-year history here, and you can imagine that in the old world, our purchasing department was quite used to their Excel sheets, to their basically handwritten calculations, to their classical processes, and now we are offering them a forecast which is basically taking off a big workload from them, which might bring up the feeling of not being needed anymore for some of them. And there you need to do the change management and tell them, well, now you can do the work that you should do, namely the strategic work, and not so much the calculating Excel sheets. What also helps is dissect complex problems into smaller bits. So the forecast is just one bit of this complex setting, but still we need to keep in the back of our minds that there are many systems following this forecast which can have an impact on the results of the forecast again. So that's why, for example, in the choice of algorithms, you need to find algorithms which are able to rapidly adapt to, or to rapidly retrain based on new feedback loops, basically. And then last learning, experience, well, it's a science, and so it's experiment-based. And experiments do not always yield the expected results, but still you can try everything to prepare as well as possible in order to yield the results that you expect in the benefit of the company. So my time's up. Thank you for listening, and use the chat for questions.